Our next guest is on the front lines of Puerto Rico's fight for statehood, and we want to welcome Puerto Rico Governor Richard Rosselló. Governor, thank you for joining us this morning. Before we get into the statehood issue, just give us a sort of state of the state of where things stand post the storm and what's happened here.
Well, you know, we've had a very long recovery.
Right.
We've had to battle a lot of bureaucracy. But in the, you know, sort of positive side, I think long-term, Puerto Rico is becoming a very exciting place to invest. You know, we're going to have a significant amount of rebuilt money so that we don't just put back the old energy grid that was there. We put a new energy grid, for example. We're going to be, I think, the most competitive jurisdiction in opportunity zones, which we can discuss over here as well, that'll bring investment. And there's certain incentives in Puerto Rico that you won't find anywhere else in the United States. So people should really keep an eye on our...
I want to talk about the investment issue in a moment, but I also, because we've been talking about Elon Musk all morning, if you remember, Elon Musk, as you know, I think you talked to him at one point early on when he wanted to bring some of his battery technology to the country. Whatever happened?
Well, several things happened. I saw a tweet, and I just decided to answer. I told them, you know, take a look at Puerto Rico as a place where you can showcase that your technology scales. And that's when Tesla sort of got interested in Puerto Rico after the storms. They've done a lot of humanitarian work. Most of it, you know, hasn't been publicized. But they also submitted an unsolicited proposal in our P3 structure for peaker units to generate energy, about 200 to 300 megawatts. So they're involved in the process, and now it's going to go to RFP, and we'll see how it goes for them.
Right. Explain this. The president, of course, has rejected this idea of statehood. How much of that is an economic story, you think, in terms of what the liability the U.S. government would take on if you became a state?
Well, it might be in terms of perception, but in reality, it shouldn't be a consideration. I mean, Puerto Rico does have its issues, its fiscal issues, economic issues, and so forth, but we're dealing with them. We have a fiscal plan moving forward. We're on Title III, which is sort of a Chapter 9 type restructuring court. And the reality is that there is much added value to Puerto Rico becoming a state. Puerto Rico, I see it as becoming the connector of the Americas. Of course, we're part of the United States, but at the same time, culturally, we're very much connected to South and Central America, geographically positioned. Our labor force, while it's not as big, it's very well trained. So there's many advantages to having Puerto Rico become a state. And I think that the biggest point, it's just one about civil rights. I mean, how can we be in the United States preaching democracy all over the world, yet you have 3 million disenfranchised U.S. citizens living in an island?
What do you think the inflection point could be in terms of public opinion in the United States? And by the way, there are some dissenters in Puerto Rico on this issue as well.
Yes, well, I mean, this has been a centuries-old issue, right? But for the first time, and after people saw the aftermath of Maria, people started wondering, hey, why is the recovery slower in Puerto Rico than in Texas and Florida? And prior to the storm, public opinion polls show that about 20% of U.S. citizens in the mainland knew that we were American citizens and that we were part of the United States. After the storm, now that number is about 90-some%. So when they know we're part of the United States, when we know they're U.S. citizens, then they ask, why is the treatment differently? And for us, it's been, even though it's been a challenge, now Puerto Rico is part of the mainstream conversation. And to me, that is the inflection point. Now, what I ask all decision makers is to have a position. I mean, you can't just run away from this issue. That's what's happened the last 100 years. You know, people give us a happy talk. They say that they understand. They say they support self-determination. But when it comes to time to take action, they don't do it. So my call upon leaders and to anybody that comes over here is to say, hey, what's your position on Puerto Rico? Do you support democratic rights? Do you support, having the United States have colonial territories in the 21st century? Or do you want to make a significant change? And I think that's going to tilt the balance.
What do you think?
I think he makes a great case. I wasn't going to get into the whole politics of the issue, but we're still trying to figure out exactly where something happened, the supply chain. Because I'm not, did the federal government and FEMA live up to its promises? And was there a problem? We go back to Katrina, and we know that there were local problems that hindered the federal response. Were there problems in Puerto Rico once the supplies got there that where things broke down, or where are we now on that?
Well, during the recovery, of course, and in the aftermath of what we believe is the most devastating event in the modern history of the United States, of course, there were events that broke down. It was challenging. I mean, just consider Puerto Rico had no energy.
It was challenging. Yeah.
Had no telecoms. Had no roads to connect. Little water service. So working from that was a new sort of a new world. But the truth of the matter is that bureaucracy has hampered the recovery. I mean, now we're a year removed.
In Puerto Rico or FEMA bureaucracy?
FEMA's bureaucracy. Yeah, FEMA's bureaucracy has been it. And again, I like to show evidence about these claims. I like to say what's been good and what's been bad. The bad in terms of FEMA has been that there has been a level of bureaucracy imposed in our island that, for example, wasn't imposed in Texas and Florida. So you can see the comparison, and the recovery, therefore, has taken longer.
We got to go, but just speak to one final issue. Your mayor in San Juan, of course, had some comments about the death toll after Maria, and of course, President Trump has disputed those numbers. Where do you land and stand?
Well, I land on the side of science. Before I became governor, I was a scientist, and what we did was we externalized an investigation. GW took it. You know, it's a death toll estimate, but it's a very good scientific process. So I support that, so much so that we took the 2,975 number as the official number. But look, one last thing I have to say is all of these things have happened, but now it's really the time to invest in Puerto Rico. Opportunity zones, possibly $80 to $100 billion coming to Puerto Rico to build novel transformation of the energy grid, water, infrastructure in general. So everybody should take a look at Puerto Rico because, in my view, it is the most exciting place to invest right now.
Governor, we always appreciate it. Thank you for coming in this morning.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, coming up, we're going to take you, we're going to take you live to France for an update on the Ryder Cup underway this morning. NBC golf analyst David Faraday will join us. Then in the next hour, we're going to talk